curious bright object zipped across the night sky and landed on a farm in a small town of Flatwoods in Braxton County, West Virginia. Witnesses described seeing a tall humanoid figure wearing a pointed hood in the shape of a spade, having a blood-red face with a pair of large, ominous glowing eyes. Biting into your nightmares is a cryptid commonly known as the Flatwoods monster, the subject and inspiration of today's project. Join me on my creative process on how I created him. Starting out this build by making the armature, I'll be using a blend of various types of wires, a little tape for support, and foil to bulk out my structure. Just going to put aside the torso for now, since I will be focusing on the head first. Using Apoxie Sculpt as my clay, this build is going to be very epoxy heavy this time around, with equal parts of A and B mixed thoroughly. Just going to hand knead this clay, since I want this to be as fairly thin in terms of thickness. Now to cover the whole thing and vigorously roll it out, since I want a nice and smooth round head. Using some glass cabochons for my eyes. Just going to quickly carve out eye sockets. Now to let this set and cure completely before moving on. Now that it's fully set and rock solid, I can begin hollowing out the foil. Since glowing eyes are an important characteristic of the Flatwoods monster, I plan on filling the space with lights to make this glowing eyes effect. I am left now with what is basically a skull. With all my important elements in order, I can start fleshing out the details of this head sculpt. Using good old Cosclay, I've looked at dozens of amazing fan art of this monster to get a good idea of how I want to portray him. While I do plan on staying true to most of his look and color scheme, I really want to expand upon his head to be more than just a basic sphere, just to elevate his overall look. Adding now the many vein-like squiggly noodles to the top of the head for that brain-like texture. It's not really known if he has a mouth, but I kinda want to give him one anyways, playing off the same texture I got going on with the top of the head. I had this idea to make these vent-like openings to imply that there's a mouth. It's just weird and very alien-like, which is what I'm going for. With the head all sculpted, I will now finish up the eyes. Using UV resin and some ink. I've used this technique before on past projects to add colors to glass eyes. Another good way is to add color to glossy varnish and paint it on as well. Now moving on to the hood, I'll be using Super Sculpey Original. Using an old batch of clay, I had to really condition them prior. While that is baking, we can move on to the torso, using more Apoxie Sculpt. Still just building up the general shape at this point, I plan on covering all of this with the cowl later on. Time to build up the rest of the body. I've been saving this old milk bottle for just the right project, making a little opening at the top for my rod that will connect to my base later on. This bottle is the perfect shape to act as a base for the long dress that the Flatwoods monster is known to have, but I also plan on using it for its function, marking where I want the length of the bottom to be. then cut. The final result would make him appear to be floating. Making a second hole in the cap to feed my fairy lights through. Just going to bundle up my lights at the very top where the head is going to be. It's really starting to come together. Now let's finish up the body. I connected the cap to the torso and started sculpting out the thin noodle arms, while finishing the tiny claw hands that it's known to have. Switching gears for a bit and focusing on the lower body now. It essentially looks like a flowy skirt or dress, so that's what I'm going with. Just gotta get this all covered up, and then just pinching certain areas throughout to start creating the folds. This clay can get very tacky, so using water helps to smooth and blend it out, making it so much easier to work with. Last thing now is to make the cowl. I want to keep the design simple and not do anything too over the top. Once I have my basic shape, I'll be going back to using Cosclay. Time for more sanding to really polish up all my uneven sides and edges, using both dry and wet sanding. Now to reattach the cowl. A tiny bit of tape will hold them together while I seal all my seams up with more Apoxie Sculpt. Since I decided to use a plastic milk bottle in this build, I really had to think of creative ways to not use polymer clay. While quite frustrating at times, it has been a fun challenge for me as well. I can finally now attach the head, widening the holes I made so that feeding in the lights will be much easier for me. A little hot glue to hold it in place. With the help of my rod, I'm wrapping up my lights to form a little ball. This will help create a very even and concentrated light when it shines through the eyes. Now let's seal it up with a bit of clay. Same thing with the head, fusing it to the body with more clay. With our Flatwoods monster all sculpted, time to paint. Going to first even everything out with a base coat of black. I'm slightly watering it down since the paint is a bit thick. The bottom skirt part will get a nice coat of black as well. Using this dark red and mixing it with black, I'll be making my base color for the head. Along with its bony long arms. Now I'm using my standard red and a smidge of black mixed in. painting this on as my mid-tone color. Then it's just touching the outer surface layers with just red, my highlight color. This is really going to help bring out all those lovely textures that I created. Moving on now to the hood and cowl. Many sources say green, so we're going with green, since green and red are complementary colors. The high contrast between these two colors would normally seem bright and festive. Switching up the different shades and tones really makes this dynamic duotone much more cool and stylish in my opinion. That's just a little bit of color theory I'm throwing at you. Keeping the black around the head will make this face stand out much more, which is the main focus of my character. For an added detail, I'm blending in some dark green around the waist, and finishing the belt with silver for a metallic touch. Having the option to screw and unscrew the torso made painting this so much easier, as well as some easy access to change the battery whenever I need to. Lastly is to give him its eyes back, scratching off all the paint with a sharp metal pick or needle. I connected my rod to a wooden base, and for a final touch, using some polyester filler to create a smoky fog effect, since this creature has been known to emit a nauseating and pervasive smelling mist. Fluffing out some bits here and there, and with that, it's on to the final look. I enjoyed making this cryptid very much. The challenging part for me was using so much Apoxie Sculpt. I really do love this clay for its durability, but it's not as forgiving as polymer clay, and the time constraint as well. So I couldn't be as detailed as I wanted with this particular project. Nonetheless, I really love the overall outcome of it. But what do you think of my take on the Flatwoods monster? Let me know what you think of him and what cryptid you would like to see next down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, remember to give it a like and consider subscribing for more art related videos like this in the future. That's all I have for you for now. Thank you as always for watching, have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.